Hello, this is Art for Introvert. Today we deal with probably the most complicated movie of the 2000s, The Fountain, directed by Darren Aronofsky. The idea of the movie came to Aronofsky back in 2002, but the production wasn't smooth, which delayed the movie's premiere till 2006, and the world welcomed The Fountain at the 63rd Venice Film Festival with a 10-minute long standing ovation. However, the reviews that came afterward weren't all roses. While some critics claimed it to be a revelation, others accused the film of being shallow and pretentious. The only thing that the critics agreed on was the emotional impact of the picture, and Darren Aronofsky seems to always get us when it comes to feelings. Just remember his last film, Mother. Let's unravel the tangle of the metaphysical problems that The Fountain puts before us and see what the movie is trying to tell us. After watching The Fountain, most of us are left with a single question: what was it all about? The picture seems highly confusing at first glance. Aronofsky uses symbols freely, tells three stories in parallel, and hardly makes a single direct statement throughout the whole movie. But under the complex net of meanings, there hides a simple story about overcoming death and seeking the immortality of love. At its core, The Fountain is the story of Tom and Izzy that repeats itself throughout the millennia in different interpretations. In his interview, the director admitted that this movie's goal was to answer the questions: what does it mean to be together, and can it last forever? The problems of life, death, and love are intertwined in this story and correspond to the main film themes. The lead character, Tom, is an oncologist trying to cure his wife Izzy, who is dying from cancer. He puts the last time that's left for Izzy at the altar of finding the cure and rarely gets to see her. When writing the script, Aronofsky was coping with his own parents having cancer, and the entire film is riddled with the vivid feeling of a helpless rage against the illness. Terminally ill, Izzy is writing a story named The Fountain. It tells the fictional history of 16th century Spain and metaphorically describes Izzy's life. In the story, she's Queen Isabella, Spain is her body, and Grand Inquisitor is cancer that engulfs Spain. Notice how in the movie, the Inquisitor paints a map of Spain with blood. The Conquistador acts as the personification of Tom. He's seeking salvation for his woman with the same despair as Izzy's husband, seeking a cure for cancer. The last chapter of The Fountain remains unwritten. Izzy leaves it for Tom to complete, and after she's gone and Tom sets to writing the last chapter, in the text, he kills the Conquistador who reached the Tree of Life and began to greedily drink its juice, forgetting about his great mission to save the Queen. Thus, metaphorically, Tom kills that selfish part of himself that sacrificed the opportunity to spend time with his dying wife in the blind desire to find the cure. A different attitude towards death are the key to understanding the characters of The Fountain. The film demonstrates two principal approaches to death: the Western one, represented by the character of Hugh Jackman, and the Eastern one, represented by the character of Rachel Weisz. Europeans struggle to accept death, resisting and fighting it. The fear of death has accompanied culture since the moment of its emergence, and there are various ideas of posthumous existence, even in early mythological conceptions of the world. Back in ancient Greece, people believed that after death, they fall either into the halls of Hades or the fields of Elysium. The Norse mythology explores the concept of Valhalla, a majestic heavenly place for the fallen warriors to retrieve to after death. In Christianity, there is paradise and hell. Different confessions offer us all sorts of options for posthumous existence, all to make sure that there is something after death. Only at the end of the 19th century, with the emergence of existentialism, did Europeans make peace with the idea of death as something final. To learn more about the peculiarities of diverse mythologies and religions, take our course World Religions, from ancient religious practices to atheism. The protagonist resists death, saying death is a disease like any other and there must be a cure. His wife accepts an inevitable end. Death is a path to awe, she says. Her Eastern approach to death states that death is a natural part of life. It's not the end, but a new birth and an act of creating yourself anew. In The Fountain, Aronofsky sentenced the message that death is an act of birth. This makes us recall the Buddhist concept of rebirth in the 6 realms of samsara, where life and death are not opposite spheres in the cyclic existence system, but unity, a path that every soul has to take. According to this belief, souls don't disappear after they die, they only change forms, always remaining immortal selves. But the director adds one important component to the elixir of soul immortality: love. The story of Tom and Izzy ends with him planting a tree on her grave, and we understand that it's the tree of life from the third, the most beautiful and metaphysical story of the film, and the fact that it grows on Izzy's grave proves that Izzy was right in her ideas of never-ending life. All these years, all these memories, there was you. You put me through time, says Tom to the Tree of Life, feeling Izzy's presence in it. The character of Hugh Jackman goes through many cycles of rebirth, fixing each one of them with tattoos on his body. He makes the first one in the incredibly powerful scene right after his wife died. "I'm dying. whispers Tom, smiling and crying at the end of the film, and a knowing smile appears on Izzy's face. And the tree of life, almost dead already, blooms again. The main character had to sacrifice himself to save the tree. In The Fountain, Aronofsky confronts the European concept of self, which is born in the works of René Descartes and Immanuel Kant, implies a clear distinction between humans and the world. The human self is independent and self-sufficient, but love is the feeling that makes us doubt human independence. That's why love becomes the central theme. European man is afraid of death so much because it means the end of their self. Throughout history, people sought a remedy against mortality, and in The Fountain, it is the Conquistador who is looking for a means of eternal life. Aronofsky gives his own answer to this question. Solving the problem of death with the help of rational knowledge doesn't satisfy him. That's why he resources to Eastern philosophy, which is not afraid of death and hints that it's love that can help us achieve immortality. The problem with love between two people is that at some point death inevitably meddles with it. Tom watches his wife die and can do nothing about it. Therefore, in The Fountain, the value of immortality lies not in immortality itself, but in reaching eternal love. To achieve that, you need to go beyond your own self, which is incredibly difficult for European mind to do due to our obsession with our existence. The Conquistador couldn't do it, and the elixir of eternal youth killed him eventually. The entire path of the protagonist is a path of gradual departure from himself for the sake of self-sacrifice in the name of love and for the sake of gaining immortality. Another film message worth speaking about is that death is an act of creation. It tells the legend of a deity that died, launching the beginning of a whole world with its death. Scandinavian and Egyptian mythologies provide similar ideas. That is, true immortality can only be achieved through death. Therefore, Izzy's life path doesn't end with her physical death. She starts a new life, as Tom did at the moment of his inspiration. So, the movie before us is a movie about immortality and love. First, by using the concept of Eastern philosophy, the director shows us that the acceptance of the idea of death is the path to immortality. Second, he tells us that gaining immortality is only possible through love. Therefore, the lead character must first abandon himself, then accept the idea of death, and sacrifice himself for the sake of eternal love in the end. The Fountain is an odd and confusing movie. To tell this story, Aronofsky used the complicated metaphorical language that requires the utmost concentration to decipher. But if we look past all these symbols and metaphors, what we find is a simple story of a man's love for a woman, the love that leads them to immortality, both in their story and in our minds.